Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1-0 podcast. I'm Joel Haas.
I'm Lyle Allenstein.
And I'm Avery Hill.
Today, we'll dive into some new developments regarding Penn State's defensive coordinator search. We'll talk about the Nittany Lions, who are taking their talents to the NFL, and then we'll talk about some Nittany Lions who are already in the NFL and their performance so far throughout the postseason. But we'll start with the defensive coordinator search with a few recent developments. Al Golden seems like he's headed to the pros now, so that's kind of off the list. Not that it was ever really a realistic possibility, I don't think, for Penn State. And then DeAnton Lynn got an extension with USC, so those are kind of two of the top candidates for Penn State that are seemingly off the board now. So I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on those moves, and where do you think Penn State goes from here?
Honestly, I think that they just got to keep it in-house. I mean, unless you go with, I think Bryant Haynes is probably the best candidate available, realistic candidate. Obviously, Indiana's defensive coordinator was at JMU as well with the coach Cignetti, so I think that's the best candidate. But at this point, I think it's also just good to just stay in-house. I mean, you have to think about recruiting, things like that. I mean, if you go with Anthony Poindexter, I think that that'll be the most logical decision right now. Obviously, he has the experience. Obviously, the players love him. Obviously, he's safeties coach and assistant defensive or co-defensive coordinator, which I'm honestly confused on how you have a defensive coordinator and then co-defensive coordinators. Anyways, I think that he's the most logical choice. I think Dan Connor is also a really good choice, but I don't think he's ready. I think that they have him, obviously he's a defensive analyst right now. He hasn't even gotten a position coach spot yet. So I think, he's in the wakes for after that guy. But, I mean, so at that point, I think you just go with Poindexter.
Yeah, I think the issue with Poindexter, because I think it totally makes sense, especially with the whole, with everyone returning this year, the whole culture thing, keep the guy in-house who's already familiar with how it's operated. But I think the issue with Poindexter is because if they do make him the guy, he's obviously going to still be the safeties coach. I think you promote Dan Connor to linebackers coach, full-time away from defensive analyst. But that Virginia job where Poindexter went, I don't think Tony Elliott is going to be there much longer, and I think Poindexter's made it clear he wants to be a head coach during his collegiate coaching time. So, and that's obviously his alma mater. I think that's the issue, which is why they're not going to, why he hasn't already been the immediate option, because you've seen it these past couple of years with Manny Diaz, Brent Pry, Tom Allen. They want to get a guy who can go be a defensive coordinator and maybe stick around, because I think with the way Franklin coaches, you're trying to get him there for 2 years. I think really realistically that's the cap, because they get better opportunities. Coach Franklin literally said, my coordinators go become coaches. Obviously, the Tom Allen thing is different, but so that's where I stand with Poindexter. I think the Bryant Hayes, to be honest, I think that should be the direction they go. The only issue is I think his buyout at Indiana is something ridiculous. I think it's close to $15 million. Couple other names that were thrown around. You had, I'm going to totally botch this, but Ephraim Banda, that's the Browns safeties coach. I believe he got an interview. Lyle, sick name, Lyle Hemphill from JMU, but then he just picked up a job at Texas A&M. I don't think it's a coordinator job, but I think he's in the mix on the defensive staff. And I don't know how to say his name.
What, Gerard Mayo?
Not Gerard Mayo. The Packers, linebackers, run game coach, Campanelle or something like that is another name that's been thrown around. I mean, if I'm the coaching staff, I think Poindexter makes the most sense, regardless of the whole Virginia thing you want to throw in the equation, just based on the culture of what they're trying to achieve. I mean, he's called plays before in the bowl games, which didn't necessarily go very great for the defense. Obviously, there's other circumstances with that. But I think the big issue right now is I think they want to get it done. And the board of trustees that's involved in the hiring process for this kind of thing, they keep pushing their meetings back. Yeah. I think this is they did it last week. They're supposed to have a meeting on Monday. Or they were supposed to have one on Friday, got pushed back to Monday. Pushed back to this Thursday. I think it's again now Monday, Tuesday next week. So I don't really think they have a clear-cut option.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of going off of your point, I mean, with obviously Poindexter wanting to be a head coach at some point, I also do think that means it does make sense. I mean, if you think that, and this is a if you're James Franklin, if you think that Dan Connor is ready by next year to take the lead, if you think that's, where Poindexter will go, UVA, by next year, then why not have Poindexter? And, he knows, okay, I'm probably going to go and leap and take the job. If he doesn't, you get at least one more year of him, and then that'll honestly be the ideal timeline to get Dan Connor. And I think if you stay in-house, I mean, I think that really makes a ton of sense from my perspective.
How I look at the Dan Connor thing, it's because I think this kind of reminds me a lot of Danny O'Brien, where he essentially was the quarterback's coach, even when Yursich was there. But they wouldn't give him the title away from the grad assistant, just because there's obviously how you allocate who's technically a position coach. There's recruiting implications. You could bring him along. There's obviously how he's viewed, like just with the school from like a paying perspective. But my thing is with Dan Connors, he's essentially coaching the linebackers already. Especially obviously Tom Allen's specialty was linebackers. That's who we coached last year. But you can make the argument, like especially with the new analysts, like on-field coaching rules. We saw him at practice all the time. Like he was leading those drills. Obviously Allen was watching, but like he's more bouncing around with the defense. Like so, I think Dan Connors is going to get promoted to linebackers coach. I wouldn't be surprised if it's next year. So I think that's something that you could, because he's already coaching. He's young. Obviously, you had him making the switch to calling the plays to Kobe King from the mic, which is something that they talked about. So I think like I wouldn't be surprised with. I don't want to make him an option for defensive coordinator right now because making that transition from analyst right away is a lot. And obviously calling plays is different than being able to orchestrate a position group. So I think if Poindexter is the guy, I think now this is obviously a whole lot of speculation, but I think the plan should be to have Connor like in the wings for future years.
So even if Poindexter is like holding out for that UVA job, you don't think they would want him as defensive coordinator for 1 year just because of like the quick turnaround?
Dan Connor?
No, Poindexter.
Like
you don't think they would want him for next season? Because UVA is not going to make a move at this point, right?
No, but I think like once that job,
Poindexter would have 1 year as defensive coordinator before he leaves.
Because then you're also looking at, because then at that point it's like you can explore options, because like after next season Penn State's going to be in, like they're not going to be the same caliber program. So I think if you're going to make Connor, like you have to be, obviously they're not going to have the same kind of success, I feel like, from the 2026 season. Like they're going to be 2 years away at least before building back to the caliber of teams they had last year, or this past season, and then this upcoming year. So if you're going to go to Dan Connor, that'd be the time. Because like I realistically, that once that Virginia job opens up, Poindexter's gone. Like I'm surprised Virginia didn't get him like the last time he came. That's just a mistake overall. And I don't like Poindexter. I think he's completely complacent. Complacent might not be the right word, but
content.
Yeah, content. Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. Ball. Like I don't think he's like necessarily jumping at the chance to become the defensive coordinator right now. Honestly, based on the way this is playing out right now with the timeline and everything, I think he's the option if that's what it comes down to. I don't think they want him to be the guy, because I just think within the recent years, you look at Manny Diaz, Tom Allen, Brent Pry, these are defensive-oriented guys who have the background as head coach, being a defensive side of the ball. Poindexter's, he's called plays, he's been a coordinator before, but it's like the outside hire has proven to work. And I don't think, especially what's on the line next season, I don't think they want to go away from that script.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Tony Elliott's definitely in hot water. The only thing there is like maybe he gets fired mid-season, and then obviously it becomes more difficult because they don't want to get someone who's like still in season.
But I mean, you get an interim. Like you can have an interim and not bring him back.
That's true. It's hard to get fired at UVA, dude. Like I'm just being serious. Like
oh yeah,
I grew up like 2 hours from Charlottesville. Like yeah, the bar is so low, dude. Like Bronco Mendenhall, like he was there for whatever, like 6 years, didn't win anything, and then left because he wanted to like go start a farm in the countryside. Like he just left on his own.
Now that's what I'm talking about. That's how you go
Bronco Mendenhall. They don't fire people at UVA. Like I don't know.
We see how their basketball team did in the tournament every year.
No Tony Bennett.
It makes sense. It makes sense. Tony Bennett slander right here.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they move on because it has been really like they haven't made a bowl game the last 3 years under Elliott, but I also don't think like you can bank on that. Like
do they make bowl games in general?
So, like when you this is like how I look at the other side of things. Like assuming Poindexter is the guy for defensive coordinator, because I just talked about like the whole culture and everything based on what they're building. But you see all the lettermen on the staff. You see all the position coaches that have stuck around. Yeah. Terry Smith, Ty Al, obviously he's probably the younger ones, but like 5 years. Poindexter being one of them. Like Phil Troutwine, obviously not a letterman, but like he's been there 4 or 5 years. Like those position coaches all get along with one another. I could probably say they're one of the elite group of position coaches across college football. They're familiar with the program. So when I look at it from the culture perspective, Poindexter's been around. They all know him. Like they trust him. So that's another option when I look at it from the culture thing. But it's just, I think it's kind of a risk putting him at DC because he doesn't have the real play calling experience like an outside guy will have. Like that's why I felt like Tom Allen at the time, like you look at him as an Indiana head coach and you're like, it's Indiana football. But like I think he's always been made for a defensive coordinator. Like you saw him at USF, he was competent like defensive coordinator in Indiana before he got promoted. And I think like that's the kind of hire you want. You want someone who doesn't need the head coaching spot. They're willing to stick around for a year or two, go call plays. Like I think the plan was really for Tom Allen to like stay at least another season. Like I really don't think. Obviously, it's not like I know what really was going on with their relationships and everything, but like I think the plan was to have Tom Allen stick around. He said,
I don't think the relationships were good because
clearly not.
Like Kobe left him out of his
which I'm very
there's
curious to ask
there,
him about.
graphic. Yeah, that's going to be a great question that he probably will not answer for us. But
But it's just like regardless of like Tom Allen, like because he said it when he first came to Penn State. He said it at his Clemson introductory press conference. Well, also he said he plans to stick around at Clemson for like maybe the rest of his career if all goes to plan. But
a lot of people say that.
Yeah, right.
Brandon
but
Cook
it's like,
said he'd be a Patriots for the rest of his life. Anyways,
a sensitive subject for you, I know.
Bought the jersey.
But yeah,
Sean Clifford was supposed to be an Indy line for life.
But he was. He always will.
Traitor.
My thing is like he doesn't want to be a head coach, is what he said. Like he's completely fine being a defensive coordinator, and like you see all the defensive coordinators, it's a revolving door for Penn State. So obviously the goal is to find someone I feel like that can fill that role, and I don't think it's Poindexter. As he said, he wants to be a head coach. So if it's a year rental too, like I totally get the decision-making process. But if I'm James Franklin, I'm hiring one of these guys that's been mentioned, or even someone I haven't said yet, which I don't have a name off the top of my head, Illinois defensive coordinator.
Aaron Henry.
Thanks, Avery. Like he's an option. But if you look at the timing with everything, with all the college football playoff, the transfer portal opening, everything, and assuming you knew with Allen departing, like Ryan Walters is a guy that like I think would have been in serious contention for this Penn State defensive coordinator job, but that season was Penn State's season's going on. Purdue, he's gone. He took the job at Washington. Like he's a young mind who's proven he's defensive oriented, and I think that's the kind of guy like Penn State would want to go out and get.
Yeah.
But just because their season's still going on, like they can't focus on that. They didn't know Allen would walk, so I just think the whole scheduling thing is like because all available options that you could have considered beforehand, you didn't know were options because you didn't know Allen would be gone.
Well, that and the portal being closed too, because sometimes when you bring in a coordinator, they like to bring guys with them from their previous stop. And if you're Penn State, the portal's closed unless those guys are
Yeah, that's my
in.
thing about like staying in-house because at this point it's too complicated to do that. And, I mean, when you think about just having the guys on staff that can kind of build those relationships with guys, and you think about like a guy like Poindexter, you call him up, he stays a defensive coordinator for the year or so, and you stay in-house again, that means not only are you able to like keep recruiting in the future and not have to worry about guys backing out, but even the guys that are already in the program, I mean, like the Darius Dixons and stuff like that, like they're going to stay there and they're going to, because it's familiarity around there. It's not like, oh, it's a new defensive coordinator, he's bringing in a whole bunch of guys. But I do think that in general, having that, like the Poindexter, maybe like a rental, you can consider as a rental, is good because it's not just like Dan Connor that could be in Wicks. I mean, there was talk for Deion Barnes to have Temple head coaching job. So, I mean, there is definitely a potential that he develops and keeps developing and gets a shot at defensive coordinator, whether at Penn State or somewhere else. So, I mean, I think you have options at Penn State. So, I think, especially, again, as Lau mentioned, at this time, like it's terrible timing, obviously, but that's just college football at this day and age. I mean, obviously, Tom Allen didn't help at all with just came kind of out of nowhere. But, yeah, so, I mean, I think that's just kind of where you have to go at this point.
That's why I feel like not getting Danton Lynn is, like, kind of a blow.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, we don't really, like, I'm under the impression that's a guy that they seriously wanted. Like, they flew out. Like, they're flying out. Like, that's when someone on Twitter dropped the flight tracker from State College Airport.
I mean, it could have just been like...
Well, they went to Modern Day.
Like, it could have been the women's golf team going to play USC.
Well, that's what like people were saying. They're like, oh, it's the women's basketball team that went to go to UCLA, but that was like a week ago. So, like, I think
this flight stuff is crazy. I won't lie to you.
Yeah, like
y'all have fun with
the flight tracker stuff is really
like, come on, dog.
Yeah, I'll stay out of
college
that.
football.
Yeah, like
I don't have the time for that.
Yeah, like, it's not me, man.
I remember the little Larry Fitzgerald at the airport in Boston. That's all I can think of.
Like when you're flying out to California, like realistically, like I don't know what was appealing. Like I guess that Danton Lynn just got that contract extension, right? Which is why he was eliminated. And Penn State, like you're flying out to California, like they saw USC earlier this year. He turned that defense around. USC is not a good defense, and when I say turn it around, like
they went from like worst to like mediocre.
Not
right.
Worse. They're like, worse and not worse. It's a good improvement.
They got better.
This is a guy that like has had praise from Bill O'Brien before. Like what's it called? He was in contention for a job at I think the Texans. like Dan Lynn is like going to be a fast rising name within the next few years. Like I don't think he's sticking around USC, but he's a letterman. I think that was kind of like the culture thing. Like he's a guy that's familiar. Obviously, I think Franklin, prior to when Penn State played USC earlier this year, like he talked about like how he hasn't really got to know him, but like he's followed him from afar, the whole, Penn State coaching tree pipeline. So I really think that's a miss. I think living in Los Angeles might be more desirable than State College, which is low-key something that I was thinking was a factor, like with Tom Allen. Obviously Bloomington is similar.
I mean, it's like it hit like
when your kids are in the
-3
Carolinas and it's like Clemson,
Yeah. And that was a head coaching job. That's like different. Like
yeah, it's true.
That's a different than making a lateral move.
I'm a big weather guy. You guys have known this for a little bit now.
Of course.
You guys all read my weather reports, so it's like.
We can transition into our next topic. We'll look at some of the Nittany Lions who have declared for the NFL, which not too many of them. A lot of them have made the decision to come back. A lot of guys who had draft grades have chosen to come back. But obviously the big names at the top are Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren. Where do you guys see them getting taken?
I think Mel Kiper, ESPN, who's like the draft guru. That's the guy. Something.
So they say.
That's how everyone looks at them. So they had Abdul as number 2 on the big board, and Tyler Warren I think was number 12. I think they're both first-round picks. I look at Abdul. I think he's either a Patriot or a Brown. Avery, obviously known Patriots fan. Tyler Warren,
franchise.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he tore his ACL in the first season. So.
Yeah, well, you can't win them all.
Wood, Abdul.
Can't win them all, and then I think Tyler Warren. I'm thinking Bronco or Indianapolis Colt right now. I think these are both first-round picks. I think Abdul's odds have shot up tremendously to be a first-round pick. I think this is the guy that was a safe 5 through 10. But I think end of the year showed really what he's capable of. I don't blame him. You draw the Micah Parsons comparisons all the time. Micah Parsons' stock fell for other reasons. But, yeah, I think Abdul's a top 3, 4 pick. I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to go to my Giants because defensive line might be the only position that the Giants don't need any help in. But I think Warren's going to be a mid to late first-round pick. I never justify taking tight ends early. Sometimes they pan out. You look at Kyle Pitts, and we have a lot. I'm on your side with this one.
Yeah,
we have a lot of Kyle Pitts, but like Brock Bowers,
like
comparisons here. Obviously, Lexi is a Raiders fan.
It's kind of like third on that list.
Yeah, Lexi's a Raiders fan, so I never justify taking a tight end early. But I think Tyler Warren's the best tight end in the draft. He could do so much. That fits a need. I saw some early projections where, he goes to the Chiefs, like he falls late and like backs up Kelsey.
Can we?
But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he'll be gone. I think he'll be gone by then. I think those are the safest picks in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, just going off that. I mean, I think that Tyler Warren is, I would say 10 to, because you can see somebody around that 10 area say, oh, I'll take him. I don't see it happening, but I think he's like a 10 to about, I'll give him 25. I don't think he slips to 32 because.
That'd be unreal.
Please do not let him slip to 32. But I think he's kind of locked in that spot. Abdul, I think he should be top 5, but just depending on how the draft shakes and who wants who, like trades classic, made, whatever.
Like classic, like late reach on a quarterback, like the day.
Yeah, because was it last year that it was like 12 picks before a defensive player went off the board? It was
exactly. So that's the only thing. But I think if he makes it to Carolina's at 7, I think?
Something like that.
Yeah, if he makes it to Carolina, there's zero reason for Carolina not to take him. But, I mean, I think, again, Tyler Warren, I mean, he's going to be there. Like, I really don't know when I'm getting picked just because of the value of a tight end. Right. I mean, I think that he is a safe pick given, like, his ability. Like, he's doing, like, literally everything. He can block. He can be a red zone threat. He can go and get some yak. Like, he's going to be very, very interesting to see what team he lands with, especially, like, thinking about the fit. I mean, like, if we entertain the Chiefs thing for half a second before I erase it out of my mind, like, that fit would be, like, ridiculous. Like, he doesn't have to be – and he won't be – it's the NFL. He won't be the Tyler Warren that was at Penn State in terms of, yeah, he's going to play quarterback. He's going to play center.
Like,
he's going to –
he's like –
yeah, but Andy Reid's going to have fun with him. Like, he's not going to. It's not going to happen. But Andy Reid would have fun with him if he has Tyler Warren. I mean, you think – like, my comparison for him is really Kelsey, but that can block. Like, that's really what it is. Like, it's not Gronk because Gronk is just – that's a different – like, type of player, really. Like, they're both physical, but, like, Gronk is a whole different type of physical. And so, he gets hurt because of dirty hits and stuff like that. Earl Thomas came chancellor. Anyways, but, yeah, I mean, I think that Tyler Warren is, like, a Travis Kelce type of player. And I'm just saying. And he would be, like, just a perfect fit for a team like that. He could be a third down target, a red zone target. He could be a blocker in your scheme. You could run double tights, and he would be perfect. So I think both guys have really good chance to end up in good spots.
Yeah, I've heard Colts at 14 for Tyler Warren a lot, and I think that makes sense to me. But like you guys said, I could see him maybe falling toward the end of the first round. I think the other two guys that we should touch on are Jalen Kimber and Kobe King. There's
no
probably...
KJ.
Oh, yeah, we should do KJ
Sal?
as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Julius
KJ's the
Lemon?
next guy off the board.
KJ's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, KJ's really. I think I don't know
expecting him
what
to come back, honestly.
Yeah, I thought he would come back. I didn't know what his like, or obviously I don't know what the scouts and everybody else is telling him, his camp and everything. But like, I thought he would have came back. I thought that before the season, I had talked about it. We talked about it on the podcast last year. I said if KJ has a really good year, he locks in that bottom of the first round type of guy. He could slide to the early second, but he has that. Now it's like you don't know because he hasn't played football in so long. Like we don't really know how he is. I mean, if he performs in the combine and does well,
he's not in the combine. He's like, isn't it?
He's not. He won't be ready yet.
I thought he was gonna do like
I
some
thought
kind
he'd
of
be ready by the
workout.
combine. That's what they said.
Because I think maybe what it was is, if I'm recalling correctly, I think the defensive back drills are the last day, and I think KJ is like going to be cleared for like days before that. So I don't really know if he's going to be football ready.
Yeah, I mean,
you can't just go out there and go run the 40. Like,
yeah. I don't think he'll run everything
like,
because of his knee. Like I wouldn't run everything.
Like I think when they come for local pro day.
Yeah,
like that's what I think it's going to be a big test. Because I think you're going to.
Yeah, if I was him, I would honestly wait till like, then. If you have any doubt that you're like not ready, like I think it's best to wait.
Because when is pro day? It's like the middle of March.
Yeah. Middle to late.
Yeah, so like I don't see why there's a reason. Obviously, if we're recalling the dates correctly right now, but I don't see there's a reason why he should go to the combine. That's just gonna hurt him, to be honest. Like, because he was what we said, late first, early second, based on the season. Like he did not miss a tackle his junior year. Last time he played, right? But
the team in tackles as well.
Like so this is obviously a really talented player, and so I like honestly like if he tests well, like at whatever he chooses to partake in, I don't see why he falls outside of the late second, early third. Like if it's just an upside pick, you're getting a low calibrated first round player prior to injury, and like what he doesn't pan out, like I think that's a pick willing to take, like especially if you're like one of the top teams that has like that late pick, like why not? Like boomer bust. Like I still think KJ's a really good player. I think when you look at it from a Penn State perspective this year, it's a missing piece. Like you could really tell. I think it was the Oregon game, Big Ten championship.
Yeah,
that's when I was like, it was really noticeable because like we saw him. Like, what didn't he win like the National Defensive Player of the Year week 1? Like he led Penn State in tackles against West Virginia.
I think it was Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week or something.
Yeah, so it's like this is a really good player. I wouldn't be surprised if he's low second.
Yeah. I think the problem, though, is that he's kind of considered raw in the sense that he really only had one full year of playing. Obviously, his freshman year he didn't really play that much. Like, and even that year, he wasn't a starter.
Was Jaquan there? Or his freshman year?
I don't think
Jair.
so.
Jair was Jair. Okay. Yeah, Jaquan was the year before. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, that makes it interesting because experience does matter. They're going to be like, oh, he's a little raw, like he hasn't that. Like he seems like one of those guys that like if he slides, like everyone knows he's going to be good, but like they also know why he's sliding. Like even like looking at Jair Brown, like everybody knew he was going to be like a good safety. Like so it was kind of obvious. It's just that's kind of how the draft shakes out sometimes with safeties and stuff like that.
Because Jair and Jaquan, I believe, are both second round picks. Or like second.
Jair was third.
Yeah, he was third.
Jaquan was second. Yeah.
Yeah. So like.
Yeah, and Penn State safeties are going to kind of stay
in
that range.
Yeah. Like Jair and Jaquan have both carved out
Penn
good
State's
NFL
never
careers.
going to have a first-round defensive back.
Yeah, but like they're all.
I mean, I think A.J. Harris is going to go first round next year, but that's a conversation for
possible.
But
we say that every year, and then someone drops.
Joey, I mean, just counted at this point. If the Commanders
Yeah, if we made the right pick.
Yeah.
There was 2 right picks, and you missed them both.
Yeah.
I think
'Cause
the
if y'all
Commanders
took-
We got the
If y'all
130-pound
took
individual
Gonzalez-
force.
Y'all took a
I
pretzel.
think the Commanders are doing okay right now. I'm not gonna
I
lie.
mean, yeah,
like,
they are doing okay.
It was
I
part
think-
of the tank.
I
It was
think
all part of the
KJ
plan.
is.
We had to take Drake May.
I
so
think
y'all can
no later
have
than third
Jalen
round.
Yeah.
But
I,
then you
like
look
I
at,
think so, but you
I
just
could
never
see him
know.
going to fourth. We have to see. We haven't seen him.
like
That's the
okay,
problem.
I mean, if he tests well,
If he tests well, for sure.
but then like
yeah,
you look at the other safety. Like I think Jalen Reed is a 4th, 5th round pick.
yeah, I think so.
I think he rose his stock tremendously. Obviously, we all talk about it all the time. He doesn't get enough national attention. You looked at those like numbers compared to Caleb Downs, and I'm totally blanking on the other safety right now. That was in contention for the national award. Again, blanking on the name of the award. But it's like Jalen Reed's numbers were better than like all of them, and it's just like I don't really know like physically, like yeah he you can point some questions. I'm totally blanking on my thoughts right now, but I think he's a 5th round pick, 4th round pick.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, I
Just
think,
on like vibes alone, that feels
it's
right.
like I think Jalen
Like-
Reed, like you go into the season, he doesn't have the kind of season he does. Like you could flirt with undrafted because
Yeah.
like you look at the safety room. I think Zakee Wheatley is going to be a guy next year who's also in that 2nd, 3rd round conversation.
Mhm.
And then you compare him with playing with KJ. So like you take away some of the like spotlight on him, but like he had to play back the field spot because he didn't get to play the line at all by the time KJ got hurt. And I think his strength is playing that lion role.
yeah,
Like
for sure.
I don't really see him playing back in the NFL, but I think that's a guy you pick. Like 4th, 5th round, I have no problem taking him. Because depending on where KJ goes, I would put round and a half below where KJ goes, assuming he tests well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with Jalen Reed, I think his IQ is what's going to sell him. His
Right.
IQ, his play speed, his ability to be there. But I think with him missing just a lot of tackles, like you'll see it. Like obviously you had the bomb the Great House where he cut in and dropped him. Like you had Ohio State and games like that to where he kind of seems to struggle as a tackler. And I think most of it is really mental, like just getting down and just trying to make the play. Like you're trying to, make the big hit. Like I'm on Madden and I just want to hit stick all the time. Like just flick that right trigger, flick that right or the right stick every single time. And I miss. Like I think that's really what it is. And I think that's coachable. But I do think that as of right now, it makes him as not an every down player, even though he is strong in the run game, really strong in the run game, and he is good enough in the pass game to probably start somewhere in the NFL. So I think he turns into not a project, but I think as of right now, he's not an every down player at safety, but I think that he progresses for sure with not whatever team, because you see what happens when you play for, like the Cleveland Browns, the Carolina Panthers, the
New England
the
Patriots,
Giants,
yeah.
the Patriots when you're not Drake May. So like not every, and Christian Gonzalez, of course, the best corner in the country behind Pat Surtain, Alabama. Anyways, I think that obviously what team he goes to matters, but I do think that his ceiling is high in the sense that like if he literally just kind of makes better decisions in terms of tackling and pursuit angles, he's fine. He could have been a really 2nd, 3rd round pick. I think his stock kind of slid a little bit as the season went. In that real back half, I think his stock kind of slid because he had 3 games, 3 picks, things like that, the clutch picks, but he kind of not disappeared but fell by the wayside, however you spell that.
Yeah.
In terms of
Good reference.
in terms of his production, he wasn't that like Jalen Reed is playing like the best player or the 2nd best player on the field behind Abdul Carter, of course. So
No, I think you're right. I mean, he definitely peaked like middle, maybe like 2/3 of the way through the season when he had like those interceptions, and then as they got into like tougher opponents, he kind of definitely a lot of missed tackles there that kind of knocked him down.
I think at the best late round, like 6th, 7th round. I don't know
You
if
think
he
he
gets
goes higher
drafted.
than Kalen, or
Yes,
that's the over/under is like
higher than Caleb.
Yeah, I think if he gets drafted, he'll be higher than Kalen, but I don't think it'll be by that much. I think as again, his IQ is really going to help him. He is coachable, but I do think that as a whole skill set, I don't think. Again, 10 years. Well, I didn't say again, but I've said it before. 10 years ago, He's going like second, third round at the worst. Like his build, his makeup, like he's a traditional linebacker. Like he's not really a guy you want to rely on coverage. I mean, obviously you saw that against Notre Dame. Yeah. He just doesn't have the physical tools. Like if he somehow tested really well, I think that brings his stock up, especially to the point where he's like, okay, I can draft this dude. But I think he just kind of.
Yeah,
came 10 years later.
That was a glaring weakness against Notre Dame. I mean, he was a liability in coverage pretty much the entire postseason.
Exploited that, and you can't, as a Mike in today's game, like you look at guys like Fred Warner and stuff, like you cannot be a liability in coverage. Like if he can move closer to the ball and not, hand in the dirt or anything, but like a 3-4 outside linebacker maybe that kind of plays less as an edge rusher, but just more of an actual linebacker. I think that's his perfect spot. Like he could be a weak side, just kind of like, or maybe like playing like kind of what I guess. Nah, not with Curtis, because Curtis is obviously a much better cover guy. New England Patriot, just so y'all know, just saying. But yeah, I think he's 6th, 7th round type of guy.
Jalen Kimber, that's a guy that actually reminds me a lot of Johnny Dixon. They're kind of the same size in terms of height and weight, and I also see them kind of in that same range where, like, I thought Johnny would go, like, 4th, 5th, 6th maybe, and he ends up going undrafted. So, I mean, I don't expect Kimber to go undrafted, but I think just in terms of kind of their build and a little bit of play style, kind of they're smaller guys, but they play pretty physical in coverage, which, could potentially lead to flags and things like that, but I think are, very solid corners overall. Where do you guys see Kimber?
Yeah, kind of the same. Like, I think 7th round. I think just because production-wise and just the fact that he's been in, obviously, college football for so long, he isn't putting up the numbers that you would expect of a, 5th-year veteran. I think he's a talented player. I think that anywhere, as long as he doesn't have to be the number one corner, I think he can be serviceable in the rotation type of things like that. And I think he gets a shot somewhere, but I don't think, his stock is, going to be 5th, 4th, 3rd round or anything.
Yeah, I think 6th through undrafted, but another undrafted guy if it were to happen. He gets those training camp deals. I think this is a guy that fight for a practice squad spot, maybe get some burner in the preseason. Just seeing a lot of college football. Obviously, Georgia, Florida, and Penn State saw time. Like, no reason not to take a shot at him.
And then, do you guys think Sal Wormley gets drafted?
I think I'm going to lock him in the 6th round.
Yeah.
Like, another guy started for 3 years at Penn State against Big Ten defensive line. He's played well. Obviously, he had that few holding penalties, some personal fouls this year that you could point to and be like, that's got to get cleaned up. But I think that's also a safest pick, late round, proven veteran offensive lineman.
Yeah, I think 6th round, as you said. I think the holding penalties and everything, that was just him. Like, I've been here 6 years. I'm just going to do what I want today.
He's that kind of guy,
I'm
too.
serious. That's him. That's who he is. And I also think that he would be a great locker room guy for anyone. I mean, I think, obviously, he'd be a rookie right now, but he's like, I'm not going to guess Sal's age. I don't want to get in trouble. But
8, 9, 10 years with me at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, so he's been around for a minute. So, like, I think he could definitely be a offensive lineman anywhere. I think him as a guard, literally in any system, just kind of being that backup guy until, his time is ready and stuff like that. I think that's perfect for him. So, yeah, he's a Penn State offensive lineman. I don't think there's a reason for him to go and drop it.
Julian Fleming?
Well, maybe if he has a great workout and runs like a 4.2, someone will give him a shot.
I don't think he should get drafted at all. Another guy that I would be surprised if he got a training camp deal, even though I don't think he should get drafted. But, like, is there a world where he gets picked in, like, 5th through 7th round just because of his, like,
Sean Clifford got picked, so.
I think that's a little different. But
I
think Clifford should have got drafted?
There forever. And, like, I don't think much people expected Sean Clifford to get drafted. I'm not saying he wasn't.
Neither did I.
Because I get it, but, like, a lot of people did not. I didn't expect. I said Sean Clifford, and that's the 5th round. I'm like.
Yeah. Like, I see a world where Julian Fleming gets drafted, like, maybe even higher than he should be.
I just don't know how. Like, you look at, like, his numbers.
It was like 150 yards.
Yeah, he peaked.
Maybe the Ravens is a run blocker.
Ago.
Like,
well, there's no stats for run block. That's the thing. Like, people aren't going to, I don't think, notice that necessarily.
Yeah. I just think it's something. I think, like, if he gets drafted, I'm going to be like, okay. Like, shouldn't have happened, but I don't blame the pick.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want to, like, make him into, like, a tight end or something like that. Like, kind of like how N'Keal Harry is now,
Yeah.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you guys for tuning in and watching. We'll be back with you next week with more content. Obviously, there's no off season for us here as journalists. The podcast will not stop. If you want some more Penn State football coverage, you can find us at PSU Collegian and follow us on socials.